So I'm here to explain something about IPAF's new harness training suite. And I want to start by asking what might seem a bit of a strange question, which is who even needs IPAF harness training? Because the IPAF operator training course already contains all of the basics for safe use of PFPE in a MUP. The information is brief by necessity because it's a MUP operator training course, not a harness training course, but all the components are there. We always cover pre-use checks. The instructor always demonstrates how to put a harness on and helps candidates where needed. They learn to attach correctly to an anchor and learn correct use in a boom type MUP, which is, of course, restraint. So to be clear, this is sufficient training for harness use in a MUP for most people all over the world. However, we are, of course, a global organization and must provide what's needed for everywhere. And many countries require evidence of specific training on PPE and particularly personal fall protective equipment, PFPE. And that's part of where this training comes in, providing evidence. But also where an organization wants to support its employees with more in-depth knowledge, this training does exactly that. And it is also sadly true to say that many people planning for the use of harnesses in a MUP are getting it wrong. It's obvious that these planners and safety professionals are not competent to make these MUP-specific decisions. They absolutely need this training, but also they're likely to be resistant to sitting in a classroom with others undertaking it. But of course, now there's e-learning. They can literally do it on their own at home whenever. They just get that knowledge. So I'll move on now to why we created what appears at first glance such a different set of training courses. Well, firstly, the previous training course was originally a user training course, and it remained so for many years, only later incorporating the statutory inspection component into that single half-day session. Now, most of the world didn't actually want that inspection component, and adding it actually had a detrimental impact. The main impact of this was that by including all of the information regarding statutory inspections, there was reduced time to spend on the areas that really affected the users of the equipment. So what IPAF should provide is a focus on what the individual actually needs based on what they'll be doing. About 99% of people that take IPAF harness training are users, supervisors, or managers that don't need training on statutory inspection. What they do need is real knowledge and understanding of why they need the equipment. They need to know what they're trying to achieve and what equipment will allow that to happen. It takes half a day to achieve this in-depth knowledge and understanding, and that's enough theory for 99% of people. For the other 1%, there's a comprehensive inspector course that requires an additional half day. And the final reason for the change in the way that we did it is for convenience. We wanted to make the training incredibly convenient for organizations. We wanted to remove the need for them to lose people for another half day's training. We've got brilliant e-learning, and the new theory training can be taken in about 2 hours, conveniently from work site, office, or home. And further convenience is built into the harness user qualification, because once HA is passed, the practical assessment for user can be conveniently taken within the MUP operator training course itself with almost no additional time needed. So no need for an additional half day. Of course, the harness awareness and user can still be taken as a half day in a classroom as they could before. So it's literally down to whatever's going to work the best for you. And as I've said, this is perfect for about 99% of people because they don't need to know about statutory inspections, regulations, and forms. If they do actually need to, then it's available as an additional half-day classroom-only training course. So you need to understand what we actually have here. The harness awareness is, in real terms, the theory section of a harness course without the practical, so that it can be available as e-learning. It contains everything someone would need to understand: why harnesses are needed in a boom-type platform, what hazards they are actually protecting from, why they're not normally recommended for a vertical platform like a scissor lift, including the hazards that using harnesses and lanyards actually introduce to a vertical platform. And we explain when restraint would be appropriate in a vertical platform, instead of just saying it's down to your risk assessment, because people were getting that completely wrong and creating blanket policies requiring harnesses for all MUPE work without even knowing they were actually increasing risk in most cases and reducing risk in almost none. We teach pre-use checks of harnesses, lanyards, and SRLs, donning procedures, and how to ensure we're using an appropriate anchor point. And importantly, what we're trying to achieve, which is restraint, and how to achieve restraint. Because restraint is a way of working, it's not a lanyard. So you might want to know how we go about this. Well, here's an example of just one of the short films in the course.
Choosing the right anchor point in a MUPE is critical to achieving restraint. This anchor point is clearly too high to be able to achieve restraint for the operator. This lower anchor point can achieve effective restraint, but not unless the lanyard can be adjusted. There are a wide range of different lanyards that can be effectively adjusted to restrain the operator. Any of these would be a good choice. All are quick and easy to adjust, and all will provide effective restraint, but only if the operator adjusts them. There are various methods of adjustment, so you need to think about what's right for the operator and how correct adjustment can be assured. This work position lanyard provides very smooth and accurate adjustment as an operator moves around the platform. This fixed length lanyard is providing restraint, but would be uncomfortable and restrictive for the operator. In addition to this, if the anchor point was any lower, he wouldn't even be able to stand up.
So you can see there, restraint can be achieved with a range of equipment. And the lanyard that couldn't achieve restraint was in fact a 1.8 meter fixed restraint lanyard, which I absolutely hate seeing. So that's the theory. Now, if someone wants to use a harness in a MUPE and wants an IPAF qualification to prove that specific capability, then we need to see that they can apply that theory in practical terms to be able to award certification. So we assess them under the user qualification. It's a simple assessment of their pre-use check, donning, adjusting, and attachment. And as I said, this level of training is enough for 99% of people that take IPAF harness training. But there are some people that need more. So HI, Harness Inspector, is a comprehensive training session purely around statutory inspection, completion of the relevant forms, and the rules and regulations around it. It would be a mistake to think that providing this additional training to an operator would improve their capability. In this case, it really won't. If you do put them on that course, then they'll learn things that they don't need. They'll find it stressful and challenging. They'll find that the cognitive load of doing that training can reduce the retention of what they did need from the harness awareness. It is not better to take the additional training. It's like sending an operator onto a CAP course for their pre-use checks of a MUPE. It's simply not the right training for them. So what is right? Well, for managers, planners, safety professionals, and supervisors that create the safe systems of work, determine what equipment should be used, enforce the adherence to those systems, harness awareness would be a very beneficial course because so many people are getting it wrong. It's easy and convenient, takes about 2 hours, and at the end, they'll have a complete understanding. They'll know everything they need to supply the right equipment and the systems to their teams. So harness awareness was theory, and harness user is simply an assessment of the practical application of that theory. As I said before, we assess pre-use check, donning and adjustment of the harness, correct attachment, adjustment, and achievement of effective restraint in a MUPE. If they get it right, they get a qualification. If they don't, then they don't get that qualification. And that would be worth knowing. If they can't get it right on a training course, what chance is there of getting it right in the real world? And so on to who needs IPAF harness inspector training. Well, this is for people that will have the duty to inspect other people's harnesses under regulation, formally record those inspections and take appropriate action. So this is the equivalent of a thorough examination of lifting equipment, but for personal fall protective equipment. So really, who are these people? The qualification is only for personal fall protective equipment for use in a MUPE and nothing else. It's only for other people's equipment because you can't statutory inspect your own. I mean, this is what the UK's enforcement authority have to say about it. The person needs to be suitably independent and impartial. I mean, clearly nobody could be considered independent and impartial of their own equipment. So this will be a rare person indeed, maybe a store person or supervisor. But if they need to inspect any other PFPE that is not for use in a MUPE, then they need a different qualification, maybe from a manufacturer member of the Work at Height Safety Association, for example. So for those very few people, and believe me, it's hardly any, that do need to conduct statutory harness inspections of other people's PFPE that is for use in a MUPE for an organisation, the inspector section is genuinely superb, though unashamedly challenging. It is significantly more comprehensive and intense than previously. So for those very few, it's genuinely brilliant. And why is that, you might ask? Well, it's primarily due to who was involved in creating it with me. The whole project team that put this together were genuine experts. But having Spanset in the team as harness manufacturers was also a huge boost. Nobody on the team worked harder on the project than Spanset, and Sam in particular, who's featured in almost all of the videos. But what stepped this up another notch was that we were privileged to be able to consult with the Work at Height Safety Association. So this is a membership organisation that's also a member of the Access Industry Forum and is made up of all of these well-known and highly respected PFPE manufacturers. So we could be sure that our inspector course was absolutely right for IPAF, but also that it didn't attempt to compete with their inspection training, which is on a much greater range of equipment. We also had huge help from Nifty Lift in the shape of James Clare, who even came along to Spanset to be involved with the filming for the training. Nifty Lift's input on the anchorage point section was particularly valuable. And lastly, we had Juan, better known as Nacho, from Ramirez for an international input. Nacho runs more harness training courses than anyone else, specifically outside of the UK. And his input was critical in ensuring the finished product was right for our international members. So we do have something pretty special here. In summary, operator training contains all of the basics, and it's fine unless people either need to provide evidence of harness training or want people to have a more in-depth understanding of why, what the hazards are, and different ways of achieving safe practices. The new combination of harness awareness and harness user is appropriate for 99% of people that are involved with MUPs. Before, in the previous half-day harness course, people got about a quarter of a day on harness use, what they're trying to achieve and how to do so, why it was necessary, etc. And the other quarter on statutory inspections that they didn't need. I mean, now it's still half a day, but all of that time is spent on what they actually need to know without the unnecessary statutory inspection components. Now, those components exist, as I've said, and they've been enhanced to gain approval from the Worker Height Safety Association. And these should only be taught to people that would genuinely inspect harnesses for use in a MUP. And lastly, the team of experts that created the training made it truly exceptional. So if you're in this course and haven't completed harness awareness, I urge you to do so. It will either cause you to change the decisions that you've been making or affirm that you're one of the few that's getting it right, both of which would be very useful things to know. So my hope is that by having this training so conveniently available, we'll be from this to this everywhere we look. Thank you.